everyone, and welcome to our AWS series. Today, we're going to talk about Amazon's another very popular service, and I think a lot of you already know about the Amazon's Route 53, which is Amazon's DNS services offering. The great thing about the Route 53, as I'm sharing from the Amazon's official documentation here, is a very highly available and scalable cloud DNS web services, guys. That's something is very, very cool here. That's what I feel. It's very highly available and very scalable. And if you look through some of the Amazon's documentation, you will find them. They claim the SLAs or availability for the Route 53 is almost 100. So that means it's always available, no matter if their whole one of the availability zone goes down, or maybe one of the whole geographic area goes down. They always have this Route 53 or their DNS services always available. So which is very, very cool. And again, it is designed to give developers and businesses an extremely reliable and cost-effective way to route end users to internet applications. Basically, what DNS does. I'm sure you know IP to name to IP. That's what it's all about. The DNS services. There are a few other things that you can look here. Route 53 effectively connects the user request to infrastructure running in AWS. So you could route requests back to an EC2 instance directly to an EC2 instance, maybe hosting a web server or an application. Or you can route that incoming request to an elastic load balancer, fronting the multiple EC2 instances, or maybe your auto scaling group, or maybe your application that you deployed using Elastic Beanstalk, and so on. Or you can, even you can point your S3 buckets where you're hosting some of the stuffs. You can use Route 52 to configure DNS health checks to route traffic to healthy endpoints. That's another very cool. Let's say you are hosting to web server. You can enable health check to make sure that your requests are always routed to the healthy instance. So that way, the users are always served the good content. There are a couple of types of routing that you can do within the Route 53. There is a pretty cool latency-based routing. There is a geo-DNS. There is a weighted round robin, and simple. Simple is as usual. There is not much nothing really different what we do with the weighted round robin. It's pretty cool. You can configure weighted. You can assign. Let's say you have an application and you are just planning to roll out a new feature, and you want that new feature to be available to only some percentage of your overall users. Let's say you got 100,000 users accessing your application website, and you just wants to experiment maybe with, let's say, 10% of that user. So you can go ahead and configure which round robin, and you can configure 10% for one of the your new instance, and maybe rest of the traffic to your old application. So that's pretty cool. You can go ahead and make use of the weighted round robin, or you can use the latency based routing. With the latency based routing, the whole idea is the user is always sent to their nearest location. Let's say I'm running an application, and I have hosted that in North. I have one is in East Coast and one in the West Coast. And let's say I have a user who is coming from North Virginia. So obviously the latency is less when this user is going to the East Coast side versus a West Coast side. So we can always configure the latency-based routing. That way the user gets routed to the lowest latency, which is closer to their location. You can configure geo DNS. Let's say you want to serve some local content depending on the geography the users are browsing. Maybe you are running a online portal where you are selling some stuff. Let's say if the user browse from America, you want to show them the prices maybe in dollar versus the users come in a European continent. Maybe you want to show them in euro versus someone in like a user in India. You want to show them the prices in INR. So you can have a different version of website, and you can target depending on the geographical location, and you can go ahead and configure the geo DNS. So I find them, these things to be pretty cool. And again, the DNS is always cool. Everybody knows, and I'm sure most of you have already had some experience playing with the DNS, either Windows or Linux. A similar thing with the DNS, you will go ahead and configure a start of authority record, maybe some name server, some A record, CNAME, MX, and there's a lot, whole many things that you can go ahead and configure. I'm not going to talk about the DNS working here, guys, but I'm sure you all are familiar. If not, I'll go ahead and recommend reading some information out there on DNS, and then probably spending some time with Amazon's documentation on Route 53. Route 53 is designed to be fast, easy to use, and cost effective. That's the whole idea. And again, queries for your domains are automatically routed to the nearest server that we just talked about. Some of these are different things. You can go ahead and find some of that information out here. And I'm sure you are familiar with the CNAME records, canonical names, alias records. You can go ahead and configure a Route 53 health check. Basically, Amazon Route 53 health check monitor the health and performance of your web application or your web server and resources at a regular interval that we can go ahead and specify. And then Route 53 submits automated request over the internet to your application server and resources to verify that these resources are available, reachable, and functional. So you can configure quite a few things. There is another stuff. There is another Route 53 failover. So with the Route 53 failover, if you have like multiple resources that perform the same function, for example, we got some web servers, and you want Route 53 route traffic only to resources that are healthy. We can configure our DNS failover by associating health checks with our resource record set. So that way, it always gets routed to your healthy or failover. Let's say you can configure something like an active backup also. So let's say you're hosting an application which is hosted in East Coast, and you have the copy of that application in the West Coast. So you can have all user going to your East Coast, but you can configure the failover in case the East Coast region or East Coast application goes down for certain any reason. The request will get routed to your West Coast region. So you can configure a failover with your Route 53. So guys, there are a lot of cool things, with the Route 53. And again, the most important that personally I like, some of these things, but yeah, it's very highly available and scalable. That's the whole idea. And it's pretty cool and amazing, guys. That's the only thing I can tell you about the Route 53. So hopefully you got a good introduction about the Amazon's Route 53. Now let's go ahead and log into our AWS Management Console. And I've logged into Management Console. Under networking, there's a Route 53. That's a scalable DNS and domain name registration. So go ahead and click on Route 53. Just a small information, guys. For this demo, I'm using Amazon's hosted Cloud Lab because it requires you to have a domain name. I do have multiple domain name, but I haven't had a chance to port some of those domain names to my account. So let's go back to the some of the information that I have here. So let me go ahead, and that is the domain name that I will be using for our demo. So let me go ahead and make a note of that one somewhere into my notes so I can refer it later. Okay, give me a few minutes. I'm just making a few notes, guys, here. Okay, now let's go back to the dashboard, guys. Here. So the first thing that we're going to do here, in the we can go to the hosted zones here. Okay, once you're inside hosted zones, as you can say, 53 is in your DNS services that translate example to IP, blah blah, and all some of the other information. So let's go ahead and create our hosted zone that we want to host onto our Route 53. So just simply go ahead, and then it says right now you have no hosted zones or anything. Go to record set, delete hosted zone. So let's go ahead and simply click on the create hosted zone here. And once we do that, let me verify one another thing, guys, quickly. Okay, I'm sharing this. Good. Now in the domain name, a hosted zone is a container that holds information about how you want to route traffic. So we can go ahead and enter the domain name. The domain that I'll be using in this as example or in this demo lab is a route 53-labs-19.com. We can go ahead and type a comment here. So I'll say route 53 demo domain. Okay. And that there are type of different a public hosted zone determine the traffic routed to the internet. You can have a public versus a private. So in this case, we are creating a public hosted zone. Everything looks good. So you remember we went to the Route 53 hosted zones. We are creating hosted zone for this particular domain. Just simply go ahead and click create, guys. Here, it'll take a couple of minutes or seconds, and you can see it has already created. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the DNS. So you will have a SOA record, which is your start of authority record, and you have these are some of your name servers. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a note of some of these name servers. So just give me a second. I'm going to copy, make a note of these name servers. Okay, I took a note of all the name server that, and as you can see here in this example that this website is, there are four name server backing up this one. So if this one even goes down, we still have some other more. And again, if this one goes down, we still have more. Again, and guys, Amazon's, uh, it's very highly available and scalable, as they say. No matter if this goes down, you will still have some other ways, and Amazon will recover your stuff. It's always available. So that is something pretty cool. Okay, and we took a note of the values here now. And you can see these are the TTL values. You can change the TTL values how you want to. Alias, there's no alias. There's an NS name server type record and some of other things. Okay, and now let's go back to the registered domain. This is the domain that we had registered. This is the domain that we just registered here. Now let's go back to your domain name, guys. And once we click on the domain name, it gives you some information. Okay, when this was registered, when this is expiring, what is the domain status, registrant information, administrative contact, technical detail, and some of the other things. And as you can see, here are some of the name servers. So now let's go ahead and make sure that we are using the name servers from our hosted. So if you go back to the hosted zone, I want to make sure these are the name server that are being utilized by our registered domain. So go back here and go ahead and click on edit name servers, and let me just go ahead and verify these name against that I took from the my no. So let me go ahead and update these ones, guys, quickly. I'm updating these name servers from my text file that I took a note here, guys. That way I'm making sure that my domain is getting handled or served by these domain name server DNS. Okay, once that is done, just simply go ahead and click update here. Okay, and as you can see, the request update successfully. You will receive an email, once this is done. You can look if there are any pending requests. If so, any, you can go back here. Now let's go back to our services and our EC2 instances here. And let's go back to our instances tab. And as you can see that I have an instance already up and running here. So give it a couple of seconds and go back here, and you can see it's using an elastic IP address. So let's go ahead and make a note of this elastic IP address, and let's see if there is anything on this one. And you can see, hello, there is your EC2 web server. It's nice to see you. So we have a web server on this running on this EC2 instance. And right now we are accessing our web server with our elastic IP address. So hopefully you get the idea here. Now I made a note of this IP address. Now let's go back to our services and go back to our Route 53 and go back to your hosted zones here. And go ahead and click on create a record set here. So right now, if you see when you click on create record set, it shows our domain name that we just created here, guys. And right now we'll go ahead and so let me just show you what happens if we try to give me a second. I'm just going to type paste that IP address so I don't lose it. But let's see what happens if we try to browse that domain name. Sorry, guys. I copy. So let me try again. No, okay. Let me copy and paste from my notepad, and let's see if we can browse. There is nothing here, so we don't have any dub records or anything. So let's go ahead and create a. Say we want to do dub, so we need to create a record here. So we'll go ahead and create our a record here. So now let's go ahead and give it a name here. So I want to give it a name. Let me just copy my IP address. Dub. So if we do www.route53-labs-19.com, we want this request to be routed to somewhere. So in this case, we'll go ahead and there are different types, IP address, CNAME, MX. So we'll go ahead and just stick with the IP address here. And we are not using an alias. And I'm changing the TTL maybe to 60 seconds. So that way we can see stuff quickly. And in the value box, just simply go ahead and type the elastic IP address. So what we are doing here, we are mapping the www.route53-labs.19 to this IP address, which points back to our EC2 instance, which is running our web server. So that means technically, if we're going to browse to this URL, we should see this web page. So guys, and thus I'm creating a first A record here. And in there are different routing policies that we discussed earlier. There's a simple weighted latency failover geolocation. We'll show you them a little later. So just keep it simple right now, and then simply go ahead and click create here. Give it a few seconds, and as you can see that we have our first A record showing over here. So now let's go ahead and pick this name and see if we can browse to this address, guys. So go ahead and press enter here, and it might take a few minutes. So guys, give it a few minutes. It might take a few minutes before this domain is fully alive onto our DNS. It could take some time to propagate the changes. So I'm just going to give it some time here. Meanwhile, let's look at something else. Hopefully you remember that we can do Route 53 health checks to some of our EC2 instances. So that's what I'm going to show. So now let's go back to your management console. Let's go back to the dashboard. There are different things. And now let's go back to the health checks here. We can create a health check. So what it says, Route 53 health check monitors the health and performance of application servers or endpoints. You can specify either a domain name, IP address, HTTP, whatever you want to do, and you can availability and performance monitoring. You can use this for the DNS failovers. So I'll go ahead and create a health check here, guys. Okay, and in the health check, go ahead and type a name. So I'll call it my, just call it maybe test 3. Now the next thing is what to monitor. What do we want to monitor? Do we want to monitor endpoint? Do we want to monitor the status of health check? We want to monitor the endpoint here. And under the monitor and endpoint, it says Route 53 health check is our way to establish a TCP connections. So we're going to specify by an IP address or by domain name. So in this case, we'll stick with the IP address. Protocol that we are trying to use in HTTP. And the IP address, I'll go ahead and type the elastic IP address that we had. So let me go and copy that, the elastic IP address that we had. So we will be monitoring this elastic IP address. Let me go ahead and remove the HTTP and some of the other things, guys. Host name, we are not using a host name here right now. Port that we plan to use is 80. We are not using anything else. Just simply go ahead and click next here. There are some advanced configuration, request interval, failure threshold, some of the match string. You can go ahead and play around and read more about these. So let's minimize this one and everything looks good, and just simply go ahead and click next here. Now, once you're creating the health check, you're presented with an get notified when health check fails. So again, hopefully you remember this is all about the cloud watch. You can integrate with the SNS. You can get receive some email notifications, some SMS, and some of the other things. So for our stuff, if you want to go ahead and create, you can create an alarm, existing topic. You can create a new SNS topic, topic name, recipient email. I'm not going to use any health notifications right now, guys. So that's all pretty much. Once it looks good, just simply go ahead and click here, create health check here. So right now, the status, as you can see, it shows unknown. Okay. So when you first time when you create the health check, the status, which is unknown at first. After a minute or so, we just need to refresh, and the icon should change it, and it should start reporting the status being healthy. So give it a few seconds, guys. It still shows unknown, so that's fine. It'll take a few minutes probably, and the status will change to healthy. So guys, again, the health check is now, checking the state of our application. So it's going to the root slash root on that IP address, basically, and will be notified if there is anything wrong with the EC2 endpoint. In our case, we haven't configured any notification, so we'll not get any notification. Basically now that we have now, we have this health check in place, we can create a backup endpoint such as maybe, another EC2 server that can provide users with a similar experience in case our primary website goes down, or we can configure a static page just as a placeholder, hey, letting that we are doing some maintenance or it's under construction or probably down for maintenance, some kind of message that way a user know, okay, that we are doing something in case there is a failure to our primary website. So let's go ahead and refresh this, and okay, and as you can see, the status changed to healthy 16 minutes ago. Some of the other stuff, and you can go ahead and look for some of the stuff, monitoring. So let's go ahead and select this one. These are the some of the information that we configured: monitoring, alarms, tag, health checkers. So it's looking at HTTP 200. Okay, how's the latency looking? Some of that information. Now let's go back and guys see if we can resolve this domain name. It's been a little while. Still not. So give it some more times, guys. I think it still hasn't propagated fully. Okay. So let's go back and look at our hosted zones here, and click on our hosted zone here. These are some of the named servers. Okay. Now what we're gonna do? We'll go ahead and configure a DNS failover. Before that, let me just show you something pretty. Okay. Let's do a DNS failover, and then probably I'll show you. So now let's go back to, we are logged on, we are back on our hosted zone section. And now, so this was the record that we had created, guys, for our testing, the www record. And we had kept the policy as a being a routing policy adjacent. So now let's go ahead and change this to a failover. So what it says, Route 53 responds to queries using primary record set if any are healthy. We'll go back, that. So in this case, primary site, so we need to go ahead and set the failover record type to the primary here, and we can leave that one and associated health checks. So let's go ahead and select our health check here that we had created earlier, and let's go ahead and test. So what we are doing here, we are just saying, okay, hey guys, this is our primary site, which is associated with the health check. Okay, this one, and So we are monitoring this health check. So what happens, we'll do a failover. So I'll come back once we finish this one. So just simply we are updating this record set. We change it from primary to failover. And we are saying, okay, this is a primary record type. This is just an ID to identify this one. And we are associating with a health check. This is the health check. So just simply go ahead and click on save record set. So what we did, we just configured our primary endpoint here. Okay. Now we need to configure our backup or secondary other endpoint. Basically, if this site fails, what we want to do in that case. Okay. So now let's go back and we will go ahead and configure. For this one, what we're going to do, we're going to host a static page and we'll be making user of our S3 here, guys. So now let's go back to services and let's go back to S3 here. So on the S3, there are some buckets that are already provisioned. So there is a bucket. So this is the bucket that we plan to use. This is the name of our bucket here, guys. Okay. And there are two files. There is a index.html and there is error.html. So go ahead and click on index.html properties. And let's go ahead and click on this one. It says hello under construction. That's all. Pretty simple, nothing really fancy. So let's go back to our Route 53 bucket. And let's go ahead and click on the buckets properties. Let's go back to static website hosting. So we'll be using our S3 bucket for the our hosting. And this is our endpoint URL to access this bucket. So let me go ahead and copy and make a note of this one, guys. Okay, and let's see what happens if we click on this endpoint URL. I just want to show you. So you can see that once we click on this endpoint URL, we are presented with our index.html page, which resides inside this our bucket here. So we are using this bucket as a static hosting, or think of this as our secondary or failover site. That's all pretty much. Okay. Now let's go back here. I made a note of the copied this one. So let me just keep it in my clipboard one more time. And let's open back to our Route 53 here. Go back to your hosted zones. Click on your domain name, guys, here. And let's review. This is our primary. So we said, okay, hey, this is our primary. We are using failover and we are associating with test S3. Okay. Everything looks good. Now let's go ahead and create a new record set. We'll be creating a new record set, guys, here. And we will be calling this record set as the same dub dub dub. Why? Because this is the primary and this we are going to keep it as a secondary. Now in the type, if you recall for our S3 endpoint, there was no IP error. So we cannot pick an IP error. So what do we need to use here, guys? Okay. And we'll just keep it an IPv4 and we'll use an alias here. Okay. In the alias, if you go ahead and click here, you would see our S3 endpoint URL here, which is this URL. Okay. So hopefully you get the idea here. So with the alias, we can make using our existing stuff like S3, elastic load balancers, your EC2 instance, and some of other things. So I'll go ahead and select the Route 53 S3 bucket that we had provisioned earlier, and this is the alias hosted zone ID, guys. Now, this is our secondary. So now in the routing policy, we need to change the type again back. Let me just make it a little small there so you can. So if you look here, this is our primary site, okay? And in the routing policy, we'll change it from simple to failover, okay? And now this is not our primary site. So we already had created a primary site and we had associated that with our S3 or our health check. Now this is going to be our secondary site here. And even if you want, guys, we can configure a new health check for this one also. But in this case, we are not using any health checks. And we'll just go ahead and simply click create here. So now you can see that I have two dub records here. Okay. And if you click, one is primary and one is secondary. With the primary, we are using a health check. So what that means, so the traffic is getting routed. When we go to this URL, the traffic gets routed to this instance. In this case, our EC2 instance running a web server directly. So for any reason, if the health check fails, that means if the host is down or the application is down for any reason, that traffic will starts getting routed to our secondary one. Okay. So hopefully you get the idea and the use case for the failover here, guys. Now let's go back to the health checks quickly here. The status is healthy. Okay. So everything looks good. Let's go back to the hosted zone again, guys, and go ahead and click on this one. Okay, let's see how are we looking on our now still hasn't propagated, guys. It's taking a while actually. Okay, guys, let me just see if I can resolve this via the command line. So give me a second. I'm going to verify quickly. Let's look up. So far, I've not been able to resolve this one, guys. No, here. We give it a couple of more minutes here just to be sure. Okay, I want to make sure that these are done. I have supplied the correct DNS name, so let's go back to register domain. I'll click on the register domain. The name servers are what? Somehow my name server, guys, messed up. Again, they can update these name servers. Okay, and let me go ahead and do that one more time. And let's go ahead and click update here. Okay, guys, so looks like yeah, the changes are, there is already an update name server request in progress. You will get a notification. So I think let's go back to pending request, guys. So let's go back here and click here. Okay. Okay, guys, it's still taking some time, so I guess let's give it a few more minutes and hopefully it'll be up. Okay, so let's jump on to something else. So now the whole idea that we have a failover records that in case the primary goes down, we will be able to make use of the our secondary placeholder, and once I will test this one once there's a website, this URL, our DNS name becomes alive. We'll go ahead and do a quick testing and see if we can do a failover. To do that, simply we don't have to do anything much. We'll just go ahead and simply stop our EC2 instance, and that should do a failover to our S3 secondary site in this particular case. We can go ahead and configure some other things. Meanwhile, let me just go back and click on EC2 instance, guys, here pretty quick. And let's go ahead and launch an instance here. We can go ahead and launch this, guys. I'm just going to go ahead and launch probably. I'm just going to change my instance here for the time being testing. No, not changing anything else. Let me just go ahead and change the number of instance to 2 guys here. We don't want to make use of auto scaling or anything. Uh, no placement script. Yeah, probably that's what I want to do. So let me go ahead and make sure that I'm Oh, let me do something else, guys, quickly. We'll go ahead and launch 2 independent web servers here. And okay, 2 1.html, so index.html. Okay, and hopefully that should be it. Uh, we don't know. Okay, let's go ahead and call it web server 1 and go ahead and click security groups, SSH, and let's go ahead and add an HTTP here, guys. That's all pretty much. I'll call it the web here. Review and launch here. Looks good. Okay, so acknowledge. Just go ahead and see launch instance. Now view instance. Let's go ahead and launch one more instance here, guys. I'll use them for large here configuration details. And let's create that here quickly. And say this is our web server number 2 and add storage. I'm not changing anything else. Call it web server 2 probably. Security groups. Let's use our existing security group web so we can put the codes and just go ahead and launch here, guys. Okay, so let's go back here and hopefully this is launching. Now let's go ahead and create a load balancer while the instance is launching. Let's go ahead and create a load balancer. We'll call it lab lab ELB 53. We're not creating any load balancer, enable advanced VPC or anything. Oh, unfortunately, the user that I'm logged on right now don't have the permission to create a load balancer, guys. But you can create a load balancer and put those instances behind load balancer and in a Route 53. You can point them to the load balancer. So let's forget about that one. Meanwhile, let's go back to the EC2 instance. And what I'm going to do, let's look at our running instances quickly. Okay, while they are initializing, let's go ahead and verify if this thing is no. Okay. Domain name hasn't been came to life. Let me just verify one more time. No, it still is not able to resolve, guys. So give it some more time here. Let's go back to Route 53 one more time in our hosted zones. And click on the domain name. Okay, always looking and just try to pass on that time. No, guys, this is taking a while. So let's go back and make sure that the EC2 instances are alive now. Okay, and we can go ahead and make use of this public IPs, or if you want, we can go ahead and assign some elastic IPs individually to these guys. So now let's go back to the Route 53 here quickly. Let's go back to hosted zone. Click on our zone here, and let's go ahead and click create a record set. So we can configure. Let me just think. What do we want to create here? So we had created a dub record here earlier. We can go ahead and create. Let's say, okay, we have an application and everybody is browsing, or we are running a blog here, guys. Okay, so I can go ahead and create a blog.route53, and let's say you had an old version of blog that we discussed earlier. You have a new version of blog. We want to route the traffic depending to the need. But before that, okay, I'll go ahead and verify that. We'll keep that as an IP address, and we'll go ahead and make use of the alias here. So as you can see in the alias, we are not saying our EC2 instance names or anything. So now let's go back and say we don't want to use alias and we need an IP address here. So we can go ahead and do that now. Let's go back and make a note of the IP addresses, guys. And it's good to assign elastic IP addresses, but for our demo, we are okay. We'll use these dynamic IP addresses. But before we do that, let me just go ahead and make sure that our web servers are indeed up and running. I'm checking the. Okay, it says timeout. I hope I didn't make any typo with any of those commands, guys. Okay, let's make sure. Security group, we did enable port 80 access inbound. Yes, it's enabled. So let's go back to the instance and let me just see if I can. Okay, guys, looks like I did some typo maybe when I was launching these web servers. Okay, let's do one thing. Meanwhile, I will just use these IP addresses on anyway. So this is my web server one. Let's say this is our all the stuff. So I'm just gonna make a note of this old, and let's say this web server is hosting our new blog. So let's go ahead and make a note of this IP address. And again, it's better to use elastic IP addresses. Now let's go back to your Route 53. Go back to the hosted zones here. Click on your domain name. Go ahead and click the record set. And as we said, let's say we are running a blog IPv4 address, and let's say you want to we'll have most of our traffic going to our old server. So in this case, I'm pointing the IP address to our web server 1, TTL 60 seconds, and we can configure a wait is round up. And here we can go ahead and configure a wait, guys. So we can say 90% of our traffic it goes to the set ID, weighted record sets only. So you can say web 1 probably. We can associate that with a health check also. If not, just go ahead and simply click create here. And as you can see, this was created. Okay. Now let's go ahead and create another record set. We'll call it same blog for 60 seconds. And let's go ahead and type the IP address of your new application web server. And it is, so we'll use 10%, or we'll call it web 2. No health checks. If you want, again, you can enable failover or some other stuff. Only the health checks, and then probably you can associate with the health ID. I'm not doing that, so just simply go ahead and click create. So you can see that we have created uh, a weighted round robin, so we can distribute the incoming traffic and some of the other things. So hopefully you get the idea, guys. And if you are running a mail server, you can go ahead and click at a mail exchange. You can specify the mail exchange things. Again, you have different policies. That's all pretty much, guys. So let me just see if our website, our domain name came to life or not. It's still taking. It doesn't take that long, guys. Let me verify one more time. Okay, now at least I see that these name servers are the new ones. It points to the new name servers, guys. So hopefully it should be enabled anytime soon, guys. Let's give it a few more minutes. And I'm hoping that should. I just wanted to show you guys a couple of things here. So let's wait for a couple of minutes, guys. Here, hopefully this will be back. And meanwhile, we can look at the health checks or something. How the health check looking, monitoring things that we had configured. You can look at the traffic policies. Based on weight, we can configure different traffic flow, sophisticated routing configuration. Pretty much, there are some policy records that you can create the policy record, but first you need to do create a traffic policy. Let's go back to this. And Okay, guys, I think it took a while. I was on a different network, but I switched my network to. But now you can see that we are able to go to our DNS domain name, which is pretty cool. Let me just see what's going on with my the web servers here. Looks like I did some finger frets, guys. I maybe type the. Okay, but hopefully now our domain is good now, and you can see we can do a blog. The URL is not available because our web server instances are kind of down here. I'll I'll see if I can bring up quickly another instance. If not, I'll show you the quickly the failover that we had configured from primary to secondary. And if you recall and go back to Route 53 under hosted zones for our www record. So we had created primary and secondary. In case of secondary, if primary fails for any reason because we had associate primary with a health check. So now we're going to shut our EC2 instance down. That will force the health check to fail, and that will force the request for our www to go from our prime instead of EC2 instance to our S3 buckets. Let's go back to EC2 instance here, guys, quickly. And let's go back here and instance state, and I'm going to stop all the instance. While this is doing, let me just go ahead and launch one more instance, guys, here. EMI, let's launch a T2 large here, and let's go ahead and okay, guys, so our instance should be down, that instance. Okay, the rest of the instances are down. Let me go ahead and launch one more instance very quickly. So I'll go ahead and use a T2 large here. Move it to security group. Let's go ahead and select our existing security group here. Go to and review launch, acknowledge. Okay, well, this is all running. Let's go back and see if we can. So it was pointing primary. Now let's go ahead and do a hard refresh here, guys, quickly. And you should see the updated request here now any minute. Okay, and now you can see that we are going into our under construction page, which is served by our S3 bucket because our primary site or primary instance has failed. So you can see how powerful is your Route 53. You can pretty much go ahead and configure failover, weightage round robin. So now let's go back to the elastic IPs. I'm going to go for an elastic IP. Let's see if we can allocate and get some more elastic IP. So I got one more elastic IP, and let's go ahead and get one more. Okay, so we have two elastic IPs. Let's go to this first one. Go ahead and associate this new address, and let's go ahead and call our new web one. Now let's do the same thing with the other one. This is new web 2. Let's go ahead and click associate. Let's go back to instances, guys. New web 1. Let's go ahead and let's say this is hosting our TP web server. Okay, this web server is running. This is our web 1. And now let's go to our new web 2. Okay, and as you can see, now let's go back to our Route 53. We're doing the weighted round robin. So let's say our web server 1 is hosting our 90% of the traffic. So let's go to this one, which was our web 1. And I'll go ahead and pick the IP address of our web server 1 here. So let's go ahead and change, make sure we are using that one. Go ahead and simply click save record. That's done. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for our secondary one, which is this in this case. So let's go ahead and update that address. And that's all pretty much, guys. And now if I go ahead and browse to, you can see the service requests are going to web server 1. 97 doing a refresh. So you can see the 90% of the requests will be served by the web server 1. And some of the requests will be served by the web server 2, guys. I'm hoping, that my refreshes, if we can pick up web server 2 even once, that'll be great. If not, hopefully you get a good idea about the Amazon's Route 53. How do you configure some of the stuff? You can configure the primary, secondary, depending on the weightage round robin, failover, simple. We could have configured latency. We can do something like geolocation also. So you can host servers into the local geographic location and serve the content from that particular location. So that's all pretty much for this demo and lab, guys. Hopefully you had a good idea about the Amazon's Route 53. Again, this is one of my very favorite service. So I highly encourage you to go ahead and read this paper. There's a lot of information out there and try some hands-on with the Route 53. Thank you. I will see you in another AWS series pretty soon. Thanks and bye-bye.